ask yourself the question, why do you want to be a human-centric leader? And how does it reflect into your value system? I think you have to want this first. You have to be intentional about wanting to grow in that direction.
Hi, everybody. I'm Lauren Weggeman, Senior Executive Coach here at Mindmaven. We are an executive coaching organization that works with startup founders and CEOs to 10 times their productivity and save up to 12 hours a week by changing how they work with an executive assistant or chief of staff. And through doing that, we help them achieve true greatness through relationships. More importantly, I'm excited to have Tony Jamous here with me today for an episode of our Human First Leadership series. And Tony, you're currently the CEO and co-founder at Oyster, a global employment platform that helps companies streamline the hiring and management process of remote workers all around the world. And if I have it right, Tony, I think we said over 500 workers in over 60 countries. Is that right?
Yes, nearly there. 550 in 70 countries.
Amazing. Well, I'm excited to have you here today. We can go ahead and get started. So I know, Tony, when we first spoke, you shared a little bit about your definition of human first leadership. And your definition included this idea of being connected to the real needs of humans. And I'd love for you to talk about what some of those needs are that you're thinking about and looking out for, and how you accomplish that at Oyster.
Yeah. So first is, what does it mean to connect with the real need of humans, and what are these needs, right? So these needs are below the surface. They are things like need to be seen, need to be validated, need to be recognized. There are other needs, like needs of working on something meaningful, something impactful. And I believe that human-centric leadership starts by focusing on these core needs. And from there, you can build up on other needs, but you start with these basic human needs. And how we do that at Oyster, first we create a culture of psychological safety. So people are not afraid to be themselves and bring their full self to work. So how do we do that? We create a non-reactive culture. So the fact that bad news happens, things slips, the way leaders react to this has to be a non-reactive approach. And I have to say, asynchronous work and distributed work helps, because the way we work is we get information ahead of the meetings all the time. So we have the opportunity to process any negative reaction on our own. And then when we show up to our team, we are fully present for them. There's also a question of building trust in the organization. So you want to create an environment where people feel trusted and they feel they can trust their leaders. And that starts by being transparent. And it also starts with developing a practice of assuming best intent. So what does it mean? It means that when you have thoughts that you're not able to trust that person, especially in a remote organization. I know many leaders and managers, as we transition more into distributed work, they struggle with this because they're used to having their employees in seats, seeing them in person. And when they couldn't see them anymore in person, that trust relationship has shifted. It's important for any organization, and specifically distributed or remote organization, to practice this intentionally, this assumption of best intent, so that people feel that they are trusted.
Yeah, I love that. I think several themes that we could dive a little bit deeper into, Tony, is specifically this idea of psychological safety. You talked a little bit about like how we do that. I think going even a little bit further into how leaders can show up in that non-reactive way, and maybe even expanding a little bit further on your idea of what it takes to build those strong foundations of trust in a distributed environment.
We spoke about non-reactivity. So how can you develop non-reactivity in life and in the workplace? So there's a number of tools that you can do, from meditation to sound and music to therapy, and it's really about being connected to your own need, being in touch with your own emotions, and be there for yourself first, so that you don't. So this kind of difficult emotion that arises in leadership roles are not spilling over into the organization and spreading. And that's more important the higher you are in the organization, because your emotions at the top will impact everybody else in the organization. So the more you are higher in the organization, the more you need to be disciplined in how you manage yourself and how you manage your experience. And from there, you bring that to the workplace. You bring this positive energy of showing up with presence, with listening skills, and being in touch with what people are trying to say behind the words and how they're feeling about this. Another practice that I use with my team is I try to increase that level of awareness about how they're experiencing work. And I have a framework I use where I ask them to tell me where they've been hanging out in which zone of that quadrant between there's two axes. One is high and low energy. One is positive and negative energy. And I don't have to fix it with them. I just have to get their attention to how they are feeling right now. And that overall increases their awareness level and realizes that actually, well, maybe I need to be more focused right now on how I'm feeling so that I don't bring necessarily what's going on with me to the workplace.
Yeah, I love that. And I've actually seen that quadrant, Tony. So maybe we could spend a minute talking a little bit more about the quadrant. I know it's performance, burnout, recovery. Talk to me again a little bit about the axes and the zones and how you view that.
Do you think I can show it to the audience?
Ooh, let's see. I've never tested it out here.
Let me test this. Here we go. We see that, right?
Here we go. Yep.
Great. So this is a framework I got from my business school, the IME business school in Switzerland. And you see here, there's on the bottom is the negative versus positive energy. And on the left here is low versus high energy. So if, let's say, you're feeling burned out, defeated, exhausted, depressed, you're in the burnout zone. If you're feeling fearful, angry, irritable, you're in the survival zone. We want you to be aware of that, and it's okay to be there. The key is when you create awareness, people start thinking, okay, how can I move to the right? Okay. How can I feel more confident, more hopeful, more joyful? How can I, if I'm in burnout, maybe I should go and hang out in the recovery zone for a few days, right? Dial down certain things so I can manage my energy levels and then come back into the green. But again, I don't ask people how to get there. My job is to just see them and increase their level of awareness. Somebody is seeing you in this quadrant, and that's your manager.
So the importance of using this quadrant when you use it, Tony, is really to just build that awareness as their manager and to also help them feel seen and understood. Am I hearing that right?
That's correct. That's correct.
That's amazing.
And you know, many executives have realized that actually many external stressors in life that are not coming from work come and impact how they feel at work.
Of course.
And by talking about it, they just realize, well, I can have a separation here. I can really manage what's happening to me in my life so I can show up balanced, present, centered, clear, and focused to my team.
Mm-hmm. The way we all want to. And I know this kind of brings us back, Tony, to one of the things that you spoke about in our prior conversation that you highlight, just this idea of like being a whole person. And so oftentimes people are bringing, their whole selves. It's impossible for us to kind of like divvy ourselves out. And so I think this is an interesting way to allow someone to do that as well.
Yes.
Great. One of the analogies that you gave around psychological safety and your role as a leader from our first conversation that I walked away and I've thought about several times, Tony, was this idea of being a gardener. Do you remember that analogy? And could you just share that with everyone here today as well?
Yeah. So I look at organizations like a natural environment. Think about a garden, and your role as a leader is to take care of that garden so people can grow infinitely and indefinitely. So let's say if you have in a garden, if you have two plants that one close to the other, they might be in competition. You have to create space in that area. That's one example. And you have to keep taking care of it. You have to water it. So that's the image I'd like to bring. And also in a way that you are behind the scene. I believe leaders, especially the more you go on the top, you need to be taking a back seat, and you're not in the spotlight. You want to put other people in the spotlight, and you do it without the need to for external form of recognition. You have to develop your ability to self-recognize yourself because you're at the very top. So nobody's going to come and recognize you. You have to let go that need of needing to be recognized externally and develop this internal ability to do so. These are some of my latest practices that I've been using in my leadership for the last few years.
Yeah, I love that. Another thing that we highlighted in our first conversation that was interesting, Tony, was the importance of mental health and kind of building on how you utilize the quadrant. But you also shared that your team has a daily check-in to understand how people are feeling. And I believe that you shared that it was sent via Slack. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about that process. So if it's sent automatically, and I think you shared that there's even like data that you receive. And I'd just love to understand how you came up with the idea, how you use the information. If you could talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we use an app called Kona that is an add-on to Slack that just send a message every day to people how they're feeling, and they aggregate that data into charts. So we look at that in my leadership team to see how people are feeling, and we see like when the world goes through stressors, a war or a crisis, or then we see that dipping, right? And we see that recovering back. So it was interesting to look at that data. But we have other forms of data that we gather. So in my executive team, before our meeting, we do ask asynchronously to share how they're feeling and what they're excited about in their work and in their life. We also have a mental health channel in the business where people can come anonymously or not, share their struggles, and the community of pearls, we call them, the employees of Oyster, they come and support that person in whatever they're going through. Again, feeling seen and validated. We also offer the possibility to have a therapist for each employee in the company.
It's amazing. And talk to me a little bit about the channel where they can receive support from the rest of the team. How does that function? Is that also in Slack?
Yeah, it's a Slack channel. Yeah. And they can post anonymously or not. And typically you see people coming in, sharing support and compassion to their colleagues.
I love that. And I think that probably very much instills that feeling of trust and strong relationship, even in a distributed team.
This is more important in this. This is like ways of creating connection that you lose when you move from in office to redistributed. But you can intentionally build it. You can definitely intentionally build. Some people are telling me here in the company that this is a company where they felt the most connected and engaged.
It's interesting that you say that because Mindmaven is actually fully distributed as well. And I very much feel it is the most connected team I've ever had. So there's definitely ways to do it. Very cool. Another important thread, Tony, that you had shared in the past was this importance of helping people feel empowered and what that does to work quality, how they feel about their role. And you had shared some interesting ideas around how you specifically empower your team. So I'd love for us to share some of those with our listeners.
So first, I believe in the infinite potential of human beings, no matter where they come from, no matter where they are. That's one of the reasons why we have such a hyper-diverse organization on Oyster, nationality, geography, gender, in any possible dimension. However, or additionally, my style is to give, by default, the maximum amount of room to my team. And as you said earlier, fully and absolutely default to assuming best intent. These thoughts, I've been practicing this for a number of years. These thoughts are deleted from my mind. By the way, it's straight from my mental health. because I'm not invaded by thoughts that my team might not be doing well, right? So, so I give them the maximum amount of empowerment and room, but then I check in with them. Where do they need help? And encourage them to come chat with me with any challenges, but I do give them maximum amount of room by default. Then depending on the person, if they need more assistance or more support, I come and fill that gap. But by default, I maximize their opportunity to expand.
And you shared one of the best ways that you help your team feel empowered as the leader coming in and giving them that really clear vision. I'd love to hear, how you communicate vision to your team to make sure that everyone is aligned and how that maybe impacts your own ability to give them that room to grow.
Yeah. So combined with giving them the room to grow, you have to combine it with an accurate vision of the future. So I spend a lot of my time refining and communicating and improving how we see the world going forward, how we see the role of Oyster in that world, and what needs to happen to get there. And then I work with my team to build a plan around that. So this kind of high level vision become part of our yearly plan, whether it's product development, how we go to market, how we operate the business, how we serve our customers. But from my role is to focus on clarity of a high level vision that is exciting for people, and people can see how and believe how Oyster can become a player that you wanted to become.
Absolutely. I envision, Tony, a lot of leaders listening are envious of your ability to give people that space and that room to grow. I envision that a lot of our leaders are still maybe struggling with that ability to give that to their team. So I feel like we chatted about some of your strategies to develop your own trust in your team and things like that. What are some of the things that you would recommend to leaders that are struggling with giving their team that space to grow and space to breathe, or maybe struggling with that trust in general?
Yeah, I think recommendation number one is nobody wins anything by reducing the level of trust, whether consciously or unconsciously. Like, practice defaulting to best intent all the time. And when you get these thoughts, put them on the side, park them, come back to them in 2 weeks if you need to, but don't get obsessed with them because people feel that. So that's number one, is practice assuming best intent and default to trust. Number two is develop your non-reactivity, because when you are in the heat of the moment and things are happening, you're in a meeting and somebody said something and you don't agree with them, or you're like reacting, or you're anxious. This is not the time to make opinion about people. So you have to manage your reactivity so that you don't bring that into the workplace and start being in the way of your own success, pretty much, right? So you have to manage yourself. You have to lead yourself first before trusting and leading others. And thirdly is transparency. So default to transparency. Now, it is hard. I had to learn. It was hard for me to learn what is the level of transparency I need to go with in this business. So over time, I refined this approach, and now I have a process inside of me asking me, hey, is that something I should share with the team or not? So you have to practice wise transparency in the business, and you have to have a process inside of you that pings you on a regular basis, asking you, is this something that will add value to the transparency in the business?
And curious what those factors are that you work through. What helps you decide whether something is wise to share with the team and would build that transparency?
Yeah. So I receive feedback, right? So I have people that come to me and give me feedback saying, well, here, you said this, but some part of the population need to hear more about the challenges here. Can you be more open about this? So it's like getting this feedback helps me fine tune my transparency wisdom levels and give the organization what it needs to continue to increase that level of transparency in the business.
I love that. I'm curious, Tony, with those feedback channels, what does that look like at Oyster? How often are you receiving that type of feedback, and in what mechanisms?
Yeah. So I check in with people. So I ask them, hey, how was the all hands meeting today? Any feedback? And some people just come to me and just give me feedback, which is, I would say, it's never enough for a CEO to receive feedback, because there's this fear people come with this fear from previous experiences. It's really hard to change people fast as they go into it. But people have been here for a number of years. They are increasingly coming to me and giving me feedback. We also have, I've also recently developed a 360 feedback. Very grateful for the team that gave me that on my own leadership. And we do have a feedback platform that we use overall in the company, where people can give feedback to each other.
Amazing. Super helpful. Okay. And then thinking back to when you just started out as a leader, or thinking about someone who is just starting out and wanting to put this concept of human first leadership into practice, what are some of the very early tips that you would give someone?
I think first is ask yourself the question, why do you want to be a human-centric leader? And how does it reflect into your value system? I think you have to want this first. You have to be intentional about wanting to grow in that direction, because you don't have to be a human-centric leader to succeed in this world. If you choose the organization that doesn't require you to be, right? I mean, there's many companies in the world like this. So first, it's a dialogue between you and yourself. Why this is important for you. And secondly is to intentionally develop these skills and question yourself. How could you have showed up differently in this situation? And as we discussed earlier, these basic human needs are pretty universal, right? They apply to others, but they also apply to you. So by improving on the human centricity dimension of leadership, you're actually taking care of yourself more. You're becoming a happier, more impactful leader and more successful leader. So that's another way to look at it, is do it for yourself first, and then give it as a gift to others.
Yeah, I loved that. In our first conversation, that was exactly how you walked me through it for yourself. Was I learned to be more sensitive to my own experience and what I needed during certain times, and then was able to extend that to others. And I love that idea of it being a gift that you're then able to share. Is there anything you've seen touted as human first leadership that you disagree with? So anything that you feel is not human first leadership that you've seen folks step out and mention?
I believe that humans need to work on something meaningful and impactful. And today in many businesses, that's lost. The goal of a business today in many organizations is to get to the next earning call, deliver this quarterly number. And there's this assumption that people will stick around even without that connection to the mission and the impact. And I believe in the last years, things have shifted in the workforce. And today, the best talent in the world are looking to work for meaningful opportunities that are delivering impact in this world. Oyster is a mission-driven company, first and foremost, on a mission to reverse brain drain inequality by democratizing access to global opportunity. And everything we do is driven through our mission, and people, as we can hire the best people in the world, because we give them that opportunity to work on something meaningful. And that's what I believe. I believe the future of leadership in this new world of capitalism is going to be more and more mission-driven leadership.
Yeah, I love that. And this touches back to one of the conversations that we were starting to dive into from earlier. We were talking about what it takes to develop trust in a fully distributed environment. But I think to build even further, Tony, I shared that at Mindmaven, my experience is the most connected employment experience that I've had so far. And so I'd be curious to hear your perspective on what it takes to build those deep, meaningful relationships, especially in, let's say, fully distributed environments or, just in general.
Yeah. So at work, there's a way we work together that create connection. And there's also things we can do in real life as well that helps. So we design work so people have a positive experience working together. And that's really a byproduct of the asynchronous way of communication and collaboration, because when we connect through data, through knowledge, through documentation. But also when we come to do meetings are prepared in advance. So the experience is more pleasant, there's less surprises. So we try to minimize the unnecessary stressors of work so people can have great time to connect with work. But that's not enough. We have to supplement this, at least in my team, we supplement this with meeting 2 times a year in person. We do an offsite where it, of course, about coming together and working, but it's also about connecting. But I have to say as well, like this experience working fully distributed for now a number of years enabled me to realize that I don't have to meet my connection needs, all of them at work. Because in the past, when I had to commute 2 hours a day to go to work and spend 8 hours in the office and come back home, I don't have time to connect with my family, my local community, as I can do now. So I realize actually now that I work from home, I'm actually the only employee in the country I work with, in the island of Cyprus. Then I had to go and connect locally with the local community. And that enabled me to find new sources of connection that fill that need that I have as a human.
I love that. And I love also, Tony, how that has to feel slightly more well-rounded than I know there have been times throughout my career where I've leaned so much on my work connections, especially like you were describing when you were spending 12 or 14 hours in an office with those people. And so I love that you're now able to have a diversity of connections as well, in addition to, of course, everyone at Oyster.
Yeah, because when we used to work in the office, like we were like forced to connect with our work colleagues. That was the only source of connection we had most of the time. But now we have more diverse sources of connection, and we can choose. We are more in mastery of our life. And that has a positive impact. The fact that you give people choice, give positive impact to their well-being and their engagement at work.
Absolutely. And it definitely builds that trust, that sense of autonomy, builds trust as an employee, of course. Well, this has been amazing, Tony. I know people are going to get a lot out of this. Any last takeaways, things we didn't touch on in this conversation that you wanted to make sure people are thinking about?
I think as leaders, one of our philosophy is do no harm. And I've been increasingly more sensitive to that question. And in many ways, unintentionally, leaders, we can create negative impact in the organization. And it's really, how do you become more aware of this and continue to manage yourself and continue to be compassionate to yourself as well, because if you are put in positions that are really challenging sometimes, and you have to be grateful to yourself to have done everything you can aligned with your value to lead the team of the business.
Yeah, I love that. I love, Tony, so much of what you've shared does just bring us back to this idea of the importance of self-awareness as a leader. And I know that that's something that you've spent years developing in yourself. But just love that concept of doing no harm and how you're able to demonstrate that as a leader. Amazing. Thank you so much for joining us. All right. Thanks a lot. See you, Tony.